Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be in the world, and welcome to today's webinar on valuing the gig economy. As the COVID-19 pandemic advances and technology advances reshape the nature of work across the globe, gig work is a hot topic. We know it's not the typical 9-to-5 office gig, but what exactly is a gig worker? Is it your Uber driver, the freelance blogger you enjoy reading, the constructive worker across the street, or the latest influencer you see popping up on social media? How do we define gig work, let alone value it? Today, we are privileged to hear from Adam Pode, Head of Research at Staffing Industry Analysts. Adam has advised Parliament, corporates, private equity firms, and the US government on staffing and workforce solutions. And thanks to the miracle of technology, Adam is joining us from his hotel room in Brussels to dissect the human components of the global gig economy and define the value of staffing, consultancy, temporary, and platform work. Before I head over to Adam, please bear with me for some brief housekeeping points. My name is Charlotte Ashley, and I manage the FS Club here at CN. And I'm immensely grateful to our very generous sponsors who enable us to continue to bring you a wide range of thought-provoking content across finance, technology, and economics. The slides for this webinar will be publicly available on our website and in the chat box. We'll also be holding a 20-minute Q&A session after Adam's presentation, so please use the GoToWebinar chat facility to send your questions in to me so I can feed them into the conversation. Now, it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just to reiterate, my name is Adam Pode. I'm Director of Research for EMEA and APAC for Staffing Industry Analysts, and we are the global advisors on staffing and workforce solutions. What does that actually mean? That means that we have two sorts of clients. We have staffing firms like Deco, Manpower, or Kelly, who we advise on market sizes, market forecasts, and what have you. And we also have the buyers or the customers of those firms, the likes of BP or Shell and McDonald's, who get advice from us on how to work with those firms. Having been said, what I want to do today is look at the gig economy, as Charlotte alluded to. And the first thing I would say is it's absolutely amazing to me that if you look up when the term gig economy actually first appeared, it was only 7 years ago in 2015, as this chart from Google Trends shows, that the term actually started being used to a high degree. It seems like the term has been around forever. Now, as Charlotte alluded to, you may associate the gig economy with being run down by a delivery driver on the streets of London or waiting for a taxi. But what I want to do today is show you that the gig economy is so much more than that. I'm going to give you a lot of definitions today, and I'll give you a source for those definitions in a minute. But I think this is the best place to start. Sorry, I'm just moving the slides out of the way. The gig economy we characterize as being of limited tenure. The gig economy, you can read the definition. I won't insult your intelligence by reading out to you. We think is synonymous with contingent work. And there is a tendency to limit the gig economy or thoughts of the gig economy to just transactions with a mediation system online. And I want to show you why today that's so much more. But we very definitely see the contingent worker and the gig worker as one of the same beasts. And I'll just leave this up for a second so you can read both of the definitions. Okay, so the contingent work and gig work we think is the same. And the gig economy we think has 5 aspects, which I'm going to talk to about today. The platform-related work, the sort of work that is mediated through a platform, temporary agency work, other temporary work, independent contracting, and statement of work consulting. those 5 elements are very definitely part of the gig economy. What we don't think is part of the gig economy is the other area of the digital economy, non-labor related online services. So a long way of saying companies like Airbnb or Zipcar. And the reason we don't include those companies in the gig economy is there's no gig involved. You hire a house, you hire a car with one of both of those platforms. What you don't hire is a person. And there is an exception to that, which I'll come to in a minute. But let's have a look at these 5 different areas, one after the other. The first area I want to look at are temporary agency workers, or as some people would call them, temps. You've got the definition here, someone sourced through a staffing company who performs work for an organization. Now, the absolute key with temporary agency workers, or temp workers as they're called, is they have no control over the work that they do. They're hired to do a job, that they go into an organization and they're told what work they're going to be doing. They have no control. And that's important from a legal definition. Now, all of the areas in yellow are our definitions, and they all come from our lexicon, which you can find on our website at staffingindustry.com. So if you want to have any of these definitions or more, as Charlotte said, you're going to get the slides anyway, but please go to the website and download the lexicon, which I think you'll find useful. Okay, so temps started around the end of the First World War. They started with Alfred Marks, was one of the first agencies in the UK. And Alfred Marks, I'm sure, is a name that will be very familiar to some of you. Alfred started a business hiring out waiters to the UK banqueting service. And he hired them out for 5 shillings at lunchtime, 7 and 6 in the evening. I can't remember the last time I wrote down pounds, shillings and pence. And he got commission for each hour of 6 shillings for lunch and 9 shillings for the evening. Now, obviously, hospitality is still a huge part of the staffing market, and the workers are still probably hourly paid. But let's fast forward to what we call contractors now in 2022. And there's a huge amount of variety and difference in the industry. A contractor in these terms is still used interchangeably with a temp worker. It is the same thing, although it gets confusing when you add in independent contractors, as I will in a minute. But again, contractors will tend to be at the more professional end of the business. They'll tend to be working in things like IT, engineering, and construction, as you can see on the screen. And there's that professional, differentiation by calling them contractors rather than temporary agency workers. How do we value the marketplace? Well, for just temporary work in 2022, for the 15 largest companies, largest countries in the world in terms of temporary revenue, we thought that the market was worth $369 billion, and that is 89% of the total market value of $415 million in 2020. I'm updating these figures for 2021 later in the year, and you'll be able to see our report on our website. But what I can tell you is we think the market in 2021 grew overall for both temporary work and recruitment by 21%, and will grow 9% worldwide in 2022, and a further 6% in 2023. So you've got a market that's pushing 550 billion nowadays. The second category of gig workers, or the second part of the gig economy I wanted to talk about, was other temporary workers. And you'll find that these are the people who work directly for an organization, but for, again, a short or limited duration. You've got summer interns, seasonal workers, casual workers, and those on a fixed term contract. One of the areas of particular interest to people at the moment is older or more skilled workers, retirees, who are coming back into the marketplace to perhaps train and encourage workers. You may have read recently that there's a huge loss of older workers, those over 50, from the general economy. A lot of people are seeking to retire, and retiree programs is one way of bringing them back to not lose the expertise that at the moment is walking out the door. In terms of the size of the marketplace, we estimate that it's worth 667 billion in 2020. And from the diagram, you can see this is a diagram of workers sourced directly along the x-axis and the market value that they have along the y-axis. Spain, obviously the biggest market with the most workers, but not the biggest market in terms of value. That's Germany. And Germany and the United Kingdom, which is in the bottom left quadrants, make an interesting juxtaposition. In the United Kingdom, more workers come to firms through staffing agencies, whereas in Germany, far more of the workers are actually sourced directly and far less through an agency. The third category of workers that I want to talk about are self-employed individuals, independent contractors. You might have heard of them as IR35s. They may work through a personal service company, but the key with these workers is they're hired to work as they see fit. You're not directing their every job unless you're misclassifying their workers. Obviously, IR35 is a big bone of contention at the moment, and I'm very happy to take questions about that at the end. But I would further classify these workers as either business to consumer, B2C, or business to business. You can see that the red is the B2B, the blue is the B2C. UK, the biggest market for independent contractors in Europe, closely followed by Italy. Far more workers of this type than almost than any other market. Penetration is also fairly high, although not quite as high as Italy, and the Netherlands is not close behind. In the Netherlands, independent contractors are called ZZP'ers, and they're undergoing some of the same problems, particularly with the new government in the Netherlands as we're having in the UK. Now, if any of you are management consultants, you might start to spit in a minute, because we also can classify management consultants, or at least some of them, as gig workers. Gig workers because you're working on a statement of work, you're working on a specific product with an end deliverable for an end client, and you're going to be doing this temporarily. So the temporarily with the client is the important thing, rather than the full-time job that you have with a Bain or McKinsey or similar firm. In terms of value, slightly smaller market, but this is a market that's growing really quite strongly at 331 billion in 2020. And what I find fascinating is that the United States and Germany have such a big share of the marketplace. United Kingdom only 3%, which always surprised me. but management consultants, I suspect, if you work in America, are no surprise. But in Germany, it's interesting that it's 12% share of the global market. The last area I wanted to talk about of the 5 are the platform-related workers, what you might think of as traditional or particular gig workers, although I would argue that all 4 categories are just as important. They are defined, as you can see, as a range of intermediary models that enable work arrangements of various kinds to be put through a digital platform or online. And we'd further define them, as you can see on the screen, into these 3 different boxes. Talent platforms with the brown circle, work service platforms with the blue circle, and crowdsourcing with the red circle. As you can see with the Venn diagram, they do massively overlap though. And the way we differentiate what happens with a platform is whether there's a direct labor relationship that you can see on the x-axis of what the client gets, or a service outcome. So Uber is, we think, a gig, and the importance of that is the client, you, the taxi hirer, is getting a short-term service from the driver. On the y-axis, you can see how the work is organized, and that goes from the talent platforms where you get an individual worker. If you haven't seen Upwork or Fiverr in particular, they're well worth really interesting business models and well worth looking at, particularly if you have a child who needs some homework done. It's amazing what you can find. Talent platforms, individual workers, crowdsourcing, as the name implies, a crowd. In terms of the talent platforms, the vast majority, or nearly 50% of the work, is IT related, and a large amount of the rest, marketing and creative. We're not yet at the stage where talent platforms are going out to other areas of work, and it will be interesting to see in the future whether that changes. In terms of value, again, we differentiate between B2B and B2C. Obviously, B2C, where you'll get your Uber driver from, a vastly greater part of the market. But B2B, we reckon 10.7 billion in 2020. In terms of growth, though, we think that already the market is going to be worth 15 billion this year, and a massive CAGR, as you can see. So that's the 5 areas that I wanted to cover. In total, how do we value them? Independent contractors, by far the biggest share of the marketplace, as you can see, at 2.6 or nearly 2.7 trillion. The source directly next largest, followed by temporary agency workers, statement of work, and platforms. I suspect, this is figures from 2020, platforms are already bigger than statement of work in 2022. It's great to say that the market is worth $4.4 trillion. But as a closing point, I wanted to put that into context. To your left, you can see Fred. And Fred can probably fit, or can definitely fit, $1 million in $100 bills into his Waitrose carrier bag. It's a bit harder for Fred to fit. He could probably fit $1 billion. You can see the slightly smaller Fred with 8 stacks of $100 bills into the back of a lorry. But the tiny little figure in the center, you can see, is Fred with $1 trillion. And if you multiply that 4 by 4, you've got the size of the marketplace. That's all I have to say. I'm going to very much looking forward to taking questions in a second. But if you've got any points that sorry about that. If you've got any points that you want to raise, please don't hesitate to contact me via the address here. I know Charlotte's going to put it up in a minute, and with that, I'll ask for any questions.
Thanks very much, Adam. Please keep sending your questions in using the chat facility. I'll use the chair's prerogative to kick things off. Adam, we're hearing a lot about the challenge of skills shortages at the moment. Can you please explain a bit of the context around this and perhaps potential solutions?
So, yeah, you're dead right, Charlotte. There is a huge skills mismatch in the marketplace. There are, if you're looking for, say, Java developers, there's tens of thousands of jobs where there are simply not enough workers to fill that work. But if you think about the IT temporary staffing market, for example, most of the revenue is generated in America, 52%. 30% is generated in EMEA and a further 18% in APAC. But if you look at where global software developers are located, 48% of those workers are in APAC. So there might not be skill shortages. It might just be that the workers are in the wrong place. And what's getting really interesting, particularly with the boost that COVID gave the world, is that hybrid working or remote working, remote working may be an enormous force for the future. Do you really need to have that person working in your office, particularly, say, if you're looking at IT skills, or could you have that person working absolutely anywhere? It's an interesting conundrum. A lot of people concerned about potential recession next year. I'm slightly more sanguine, and I'm definitely more sanguine about prospects for the staffing industry. But what happens if there's a recession, but there aren't enough workers? It's an interesting thought to play with. Charlotte.
Yeah, good point. Bob McDowell asked, is there any correlation between the size of this market, the gig worker market, and unemployment slash employment figures?
Not really. Yeah, no, I would say not particularly. It's an interesting thought, which I haven't really thought about, and I will go away and double check. But I would say no, not at all. Gig workers tend to be what you saw from the diagram in terms of talent platform workers. They tend to be fairly highly prized and highly specialist staff. So the numbers aren't going to, these are workers who just haven't got enough of. So they're more likely to suffer a skill shortage from them rather than have any correlation with unemployment.
Okay. Also, Donald McRae's asked, is the rise of the gig economy associated with or a cause of static productivity?
Again, I would say no. They're both interesting points, and I'm going to be going away and doing an awful lot of homework. I can see to double check my answers. But no, if anything, they're an impetus to firms to reach out to talent and to grow in a way that they hadn't thought of before. If you look at Upwork, for example, you can source productive workers around the world. Now, it's interesting, even Upwork would say that it's 5% of their workers are highly productive on their platforms, with 95% of their workers not being unproductive, but just not being chosen for gigs. But yeah, in terms of a a mismatch, I will go away and double check, but I would say not.
Well, I'm glad our audience has given you more work. Hugh Purse has asked if we can provide a direct link to the lexicon of terms that you mentioned, so we can send that out to the attendees afterwards and post it on the event page on the website.
Very happy to do that.
Great. Bob McDowell's also asked, what factors would you suggest will stimulate the growth of these markets in the future? And then, and on another note, what factors will reduce the size of this market?
So looking at particularly, so looking at most of these markets, so independent contractors in particular is going to be very affected by legislation. So the number of organizations saying that they won't have independent contractors because they're worried about being fined by the Inland Revenue for wrongly classifying those workers, is high. The same thing has happened. Law in Mexico has just changed for temporary agency workers, and in Norway as well, due to a change in government, and the markets there have dropped 20%. So politics can play a big part. The revenue can also play a big part. I alluded to the Netherlands stamping down on ZZPers. Both of those can have a big effect. Statement of work looks fairly healthy and growing, because people want that definition. They want the certainty that you have a guaranteed end product, and if somebody hasn't done enough work, they've got to do more work because they're guaranteeing the end product and not the number of hours that they're doing on the product. Platforms as well looks like it's going to grow massively as organizations get more used to remote work. I think that's very positive.
Hugh also has an interesting point here. He says, to what extent is the gig economy defined by culture, or at least work culture and the role of society? Because he notes that there's the low levels of gig workers in Scandinavian countries.
Well, the largest number of workers on talent platforms are in APAC by far. And we've got some work. We work with the Oxford Business School with an index of where those workers are. I think that there is a degree of law there, but I think you're going to see gig workers at both the low end and high end of the marketplaces increase right across the world. Now, there are features of employment. So if you're if you work for a staffing agency in Sweden, for example, you are employed by the staffing firm. You're not. There's no third-party relationship there, and you're put out. But actually, what I think was an interesting question is, are we going to see that gig workers, as particularly on the more high end, are such a rare talent, whether firms are going to try and gobble them up?
Do you also see, with the rise in cost of living and inflation crisis, do you see a lot of people who are sort of standard 9-to-5 workers at the moment also picking up gig work to help ends meet?
I think I'll be interested to see the Oxford numbers. I haven't looked at that specifically, and like all good statistics, we seem to run, everybody seems to run about three months behind time. So I haven't seen numbers indicating that, but there are a lot of statistics showing before the current situation, before the inflation hit to quite such an extent, that a lot of places were taking a side gig, the term is, that you might have somebody who's working 9 to 5, but particularly likes taking nature photos and sells their nature photos in the evening. And that seems to be increasingly common, and just I have no statistics to back it up, but certainly anecdotally, a large number of organizations are starting to get more comfortable with the idea of their full-time employees taking a second gig.
Yeah, I guess in the past as well, it used to be pretty standard for contracts to say that you weren't allowed to pursue other work opportunities while working full-time, but I guess that's changing. Speaking of statistics as well, where in the world is the gig economy growing the fastest at the moment?
The United States, I would say, in terms of usage, India in terms of revenue.
Okay. Donald McRae says there's clearly a range of skill levels in the 5 categories, but overall, doesn't a gig economy do little for skill levels?
And funnily enough, the reason I'm in Brussels in a hotel room is that I'm attending the World Employment Confederation conference today. And this was a point that was being violently debated. I think the key is that these are skilled workers, and what is interesting, if we take France, for example, they have an independent education fund where every individual can get training and be paid for that training. The director for employment was at the conference today saying that they're thinking about doing that for European-wide, that each individual will have a pool of money. I think actually an awful lot of skills are gained from going on a gig. And while there may not be formal training, these are people who are highly able and who are going into different environments and learning a great deal on the job. And the good workers are going to be pursuing opportunities for further training themselves. So yeah, don't write off the gig workers as just somebody who's tried to run you over on their moped, or they may actually have a second gig, training somebody the other side of the world.
Sort of diversifying the skills as well. Inga Tretler asked, do you feel that gig work systems feed innovation?
I'm not sure. Certainly, every, and my apologies to anybody from private equity who's listening today, every platform will say it's innovative and exciting and does something different. But as I learned in private equity, you have to kiss an awful lot of frogs to find the right one. I think that there's the innovation of the platform, and they are obviously highly innovative, and everybody is trying to find a new and different way of doing things. But that's just one aspect of the gig world. What I hope I've done today is give you an overview that it's more than just a platform where you order your pizza.
Yeah, and I think that is a stereotype a lot of us have. So that's been really, really useful. Well, yeah, we've had a lot of people saying that it's been a really interesting presentation and they've enjoyed it. So that's good. I think we'll wrap things up. I don't think there's any more sort of questions coming through, unless you have anything else to add, Adam.
No, just that I think that the gig work is here. As one of the questioners said, it can be hit by law, it can be hit by recession, but it's definitely here to stay.
And I guess in terms of innovation and things for people sort of wanting to go out on their own and innovate and start new businesses, feels a lot safer if you can keep your 9-to-5 day job and keep that income coming in, doesn't it? So that makes sense. Well, thank you very much for your insightful presentation and your time today, especially from your hotel room where you could be out and about enjoying Brussels. And thanks again to our wonderful sponsors for making these webinars possible. And of course, thank you to our lovely audience for your time and questions and contributions today. As I said, a recording will be available on our website within 48 hours. The slides are up there now, and we'll also get the link to the lexicon terms out to you as well. So do join us for more webinars over the next week, or catch up on our YouTube channel. And remember, you can now get your FS Club fix on your favourite podcast app. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.